Hello and welcome to our Freebie Friday video. It's Sade. Today I've been asked to talk about the situation where you are trying to remove an ex-girlfriend or an ex-boyfriend from title of a home that you purchased together. And there are two ways to do that. The first one is the most obvious way, which is to sell the property, and then both of your names will be removed from the title, of course, and you can split the net proceeds and both of you can walk away and go your separate ways. That's not typically what people are trying to do when they ask this question. They're really trying to remove the ex's name from the title and keep the home. So the only other way to do that is to buy out the ex's interest in the property. And in order to figure out how to buy out the ex's interest, you have to come up with a number for the buyout offer, right? And it sounds simple on the surface, but because people tend to be complex and they're not really on great speaking terms by this point, it gets quite complicated and costly. So you end up in court typically because the other party does not trust the number that you're giving them, and they don't believe that they're entitled to what you're giving them. They believe they're entitled to more, as always. So how does the buyout typically work? Let's say you're able to reach an agreement outside of court. What you do is to figure out what equity is in the home, and then you of course would split the equity half and half, because most states consider you as joint owners. It's presumed that you own 50% each of the interest in the property, not fractional interest, no matter how you came up with the money when you bought it, no matter how you paid the mortgage while you were living together. So it's going to be 50-50 split. And so in order to figure out the equity, we have to figure out what is the fair market value of the property and whether there are any encumbrances like liens against the property that need to be paid off first. And so in a sense, if the property was paid for cash, and let's say it's worth $300,000 right now, that means that you owe nothing on it. So the equity in the home is $300,000. You'll be entitled to $150,000, and your ex will be entitled to $150,000. That's the straight math. But things aren't always that simple in real life. So let's say you have a mortgage on there, and the property is worth $300,000, and you owe $150,000 still on the loan. That means that there's $150,000 worth of equity in there, and you'll be entitled to $75,000 and your ex entitled to $75,000. That's also straight math. But then there are other things that people want to consider, and rightfully so, in order to be able to figure out what's a fair settlement amount. And then the first thing they argue about is how to determine the fair market value. And most people want to throw out Zillow estimates and talk about what a realtor put together as a CMA, comparative market analysis report, for how the houses were selling in the neighborhood and all that. But in reality, when you get to court, the best evidence is going to be an appraisal report that's formally done. And so it's worth it to pay the $300 or $400 to get one done, so that you can shut up your ex and say, this is the fair market value. And then in order to figure out how much is owed on the loan, if there is a mortgage, you need to get a payoff quote, which is better than getting the last mortgage statement, because the payoff quote would have the total final figure on what the payoff amount should be. So you'll deduct the payoff quote amount from the fair market value amount, and that'll tell you what the equity is, as close as possible. And then your ex will be entitled to half. Now, there are other things that you have to figure out, whether there will be credits to be made on both sides. And so the first thing that typically comes up is that maybe your ex moved out about 12 months ago, and you've been paying the mortgage all by yourself for those 12 months. And so you would want credit for half of the mortgage payments, rightfully so, because your ex was supposed to be paying half all that time, even though he or she was no longer living in the house. So your ex probably wants to say, well, I wasn't living there, so I'm not supposed to be paying anything. But under the law, you are entitled to that credit, which we call an offset. So you'll deduct that from the equity amount that your ex should have gotten, and then you'll be able to get a credit. Now, your ex might turn around and say, well, while I was out, I believe you had renters in the property, and so I'm entitled to half of the rental income that you received during that time period. And your ex would be right, because under the law, if you had rental income during that period, the rental income belonged to both of you. So you'll have to give credit for half of the rental income that you collected. And now the issue that we typically run into is the proving up of what these amounts are, because most people don't have a solid accounting system, and sometimes they accept cash payments from renters. And some of the time there was not a renter in there, but the ex is adamant that there was. So you run into a lot of roadblocks with that. The other things that people want to bring up are the improvements that they made on the property, or repairs that they made on the property, and they want to talk about little things like the homeowner's warranty, payments that they made every month, which might have been like $20 a month, $30 a month. And so the law doesn't necessarily give you everything back. If you have necessary and reasonable repairs that were needed and they improved the market value of the property, then you probably get a reimbursement for half of those costs, but you don't get to get everything back. So these cases tend to get quite messy and complicated due to the emotional charge that's involved, the people that are involved. So let's say we were able to sort through all of that, then you have the cash ready, then you'll be able to pay off the ex a certain number that's been settled on. That will be the buyout settlement amount. If you're not able to come up to an agreement, or you don't have the cash handy, that's going to throw up another hurdle, right? And then the last thing that throws up a hurdle is the fact that you may not be ready to refinance yet, just because your credit score might not be where you need it to be, or your income is not quite there yet to be able to refinance the home 100% on your own. So you need your ex to give you more time to be able to refinance, although you want the ex to have his or her name removed from the title. So of course your ex is going to object to that, because now you're asking the ex to sign over the deed to you, and this at the same time to be tied to the loan, which the ex will continue to be responsible for. Even though you have this private arrangement between the two of you, the lender does not care. The lender is going to go after both of you if you fail to make the mortgage payment. So your ex is going to object and want that cash out up front, the buyout money up front. And the ex is also going to want you to refinance at the same time simultaneously, so that the ex is free and clear of that debt, the mortgage. So if you're needing more time, what tends to happen is that you have to up your buyout offer so that that covers the additional consideration. Some people have cash ready. A lot of people don't have the cash sitting around to buy out an ex. And so if there's enough equity in there, sometimes you're able to refinance and get a cash out to pay off the ex. But if your credit is not where it's supposed to be and there's not enough equity in there, then you may need more time to even pay off the buyout offer. So all of those things will affect your final buyout settlement amount. If all else fails and you're not able to come to an agreement, you will have to go to court, file a petition that we call it a partition. A partition lawsuit is not what it sounds like. You're not really asking the court to split the house in two. You're essentially saying we want to split our interests up. And in order to do that, the courts would force a sale of the property typically. But in this case, since you're not wanting to sell it to an outside source, you're really wanting it to be sold to you 100%. So you're asking the court to figure out what the rights are, and then you will step in and be the one to purchase your ex's interest in the property. If everything goes smoothly and the lawyers work hard and both parties are a little bit reasonable, you might be able to reach that buyout agreement within that proceeding. So that helps in that way. But if things don't work out well, and especially if you don't have the cash ready or you don't have an ability to refinance right now, then sometimes you risk the court saying, okay, this is going on too long. We're going to order the house to be sold to an outside party. You're going to put it on the market, and then both of you are going to split the net proceeds and move on with your lives. So there is that small chance that that would happen. So it's not really the ideal scenario, but sometimes you have no choice if your ex is not cooperating with you at all, and you have to go to court and try to maybe work something out within the court proceeding. And a lot of the times it works out. So that will be your very last resort. Those are your options for removing the name of your ex from the title to the home. But remember, there's so many things involved, many moving parts, and it gets very messy. So what I usually suggest is, if you have not done this and you're watching this video, do not do it. It doesn't make sense to buy a house with somebody that you're not married to, because the law simply doesn't protect you well. So if you're married and the marriage doesn't work out, there are lots of laws out there to protect both of you. So that's my quick overview of this question here. If you have specific questions about your situation, reach out and I'll be happy to discuss those. This is a general overview for educational purposes only. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time. Happy Friday.